Bryan Robertson, who's a senior analyst at OpenRoad. So I'll quickly introduce Bryan. Bryan is a web analytics and performance measurement practice lead at OpenRoad. He has over 16 years of internet industry design and management skills, including tenure as the executive producer of myTELUS.com, one of Western Canada's most trafficked portals. For those of you in the west of Canada, you must know it. When he was there, he championed the use of user-centered design techniques and usability testing, and managed partner relations from Canadian Press to Yahoo. Bryan contributes to OpenRoad his substantial expertise in the management of complex content aggregation websites and the use of web analytics to drive website improvement. At OpenRoad since 2007, Bryan leads OpenRoad's web analytics and performance measurement practice. He has done a wide range of web analytics, performance management, and dashboard work for clients such as Electronic Arts, Mountain Equipment Co-op, BC Hydro, ICBC, the World Bank, Vancouver Public Library, and BC Courthouse Library Society. As you may know, that is a PLEI provider. Bryan holds a BA in Communications from Simon Fraser University and is a certified web analyst. He is also a member of the Digital Analytics Association and has signed their Code of Ethics. Bryan holds the current Google Analytics individual qualification. And today's presentation, as you've seen in the description, as you know, there are literally hundreds of tantalizing online evaluation tools available these days, but before you start digging through data, you need to define what success looks like. So Bryan will discuss the importance of tying your evaluation plan into your PLEI project's strategy. This overview of evaluation planning is a must-see for Canadian PLEI providers, and I can tell you right now that 24 of you are connected. So here we go. I'll pass the ball to Bryan so he can start his presentation. Thank you, Bryan.
Okay, thank you very much, Hubert. Looks like we are ready to go. Thank you for that introduction. Appreciate that. So give that a sec to render for people. Hubert gave me a fairly extensive introduction, so I won't talk too much more about myself. I don't know what else I'd say, actually, to be honest. OpenRoad quickly, you may not have heard of us. We're a custom web development firm in Vancouver, BC. Hubert mentioned some of our clients. Basically, we build custom websites, intranets, and mobile applications, and offer clients strategy, user experience, design, development, and web analytics. So, as Hubert mentioned, our topic this morning, or afternoon, good afternoon to those of you further east. I'm talking to you from Vancouver this morning. Our topic this morning is Stay Out of the Weeds, Web Analytics That Matter for Your PLEI project. So, that's this. This is my contact information here. I'll flash it up again at the end. Hashtag today is PLEI Connect, which I'll put in the comments here if you want to tweet about today's webinar. My Twitter handle is Bryan T. Robertson. Note the T, not because I'm vain, but if you do have some criticism of my session this morning, the other Bryan Robertson hopefully won't be offended that way. So let's move on here. So the problem with creating metrics for your website, perhaps some of you have had an experience like this. Maybe your boss comes to you one day, maybe he's a little gruff. I've had a boss like this once. Hopefully you haven't, but he's barking at you, he or she's barking at you to find some metrics to measure the darn website. And you being a dutiful employee, sure, no problem, sir, no problem, ma'am. I'll be right on that. And so what do you do? Where do you start? So a lot of people will go into Google Analytics. Google Analytics is a web analytics tool that you can install on your website and produces all kinds of statistics and measures. And being free, they've got some people are saying 60 to 70% of websites have Google Analytics installed, amazingly. So it makes a lot of sense that this seems like the first place you'd go. It's where the stats live. So maybe you'd open it up and see some stats like this in there. It's from the overview screen. Oh, visits. Well, yeah, that sounds important. Unique visitors. Sure, that could be a metric to measure the site. Page views per visit. Visit duration, percent new visits. This all sounds good. Okay, well that's noted. So what else is in here? Oh, so we're a regional site, so maybe some of this regional information, that might be good. Oh, and then, you know, really good customers would visit our site more than once. So maybe one of these recency and frequency metrics. Still not sure though. So, engagement. Yeah, you know, if the content's good, they're going to be looking at it a long time. So maybe visit duration would be a good idea. You know what's hot is mobile. Everybody's talking about mobile. We should definitely have some kind of mobile metric. Yeah, so here's percentage of mobile. Traffic, you know, we're running those AdWords. We should know where our traffic source is coming from. You know what else is hot? Is social. Yeah, we should really have a social metric in there. Here's all the Facebook and Twitter stats. That looks good. Ooh, that looks cool. Not sure where that fits, but we'll see if we can get that in. Oh, and these motion charts, these are awesome. So if you push play here, these colored dots move all over the screen. That's really cool. And oh, look at this visitor flow. You know what? Google Analytics is really cool. What's not cool, however, is you've just peeled through 3 hours of time, and really you're no closer to identifying metrics that matter for your website. And you're sad knowing that you need to face your boss and tell him or her that that you're not sure how you should be measuring your website. So what went wrong in that scenario? Well, you kind of ended up off in the weeds. You went at it without a plan and without a roadmap, and there are hundreds of metrics in Google Analytics, and there are many more metrics if we're using some of the other tools out there as well. So starting with the tool first is the wrong approach, and it'll get you off in the weeds quite frequently. This has happened to me as well. Brenda Rose from the BC Courthouse Library Society, I think, aptly described this as looking through the wrong end of the telescope. So what can we do to avoid this problem? So the solution is key performance indicators, and it's important that these be well formed. And most of what we'll talk about today is how to form key performance indicators so that they matter. They matter to your website and they matter to your organization. So this may be review, but important to talk about exactly what a key performance indicator is. A key performance indicator, or a KPI, this definition comes from James Robertson. He's a principal at Two-Step Designs in Australia. So his definition here, KPIs are simply a tool for assessing the impact of a particular project or activity. While these are often numeric in nature, improve sales by 20%, they can also be qualitative, improve staff satisfaction levels. In either case, metrics provide clear and tangible goals for a project and criteria for project success. So what does a KPI look like exactly? So these are example KPIs that might be related to your website, and I'll take you through a few of these here just to get a flavor as to what they might look like. These will vary in relevance to your own personal situation and your own website. These are just examples of how a KPI could be phrased. So percent new visitors, so that's what percent are visiting your website for the first time, as opposed to those who are returning or who have been before. Percent registered visitors, what percent of your traffic is coming from people who have registered and logged in? What percent of visits end up signing up for a newsletter on the site? Would be a target of yours. Percentage of content greater than 90 days old. So this is more of an efficiency metric. This is looking at it in terms of how you produce your content. Is your content getting old or stale? 90 days may not be an appropriate time frame, but you could apply something like this to understand how well your site is performing in terms of your internal process. Percentage of content rated 3 stars or higher. If you've got a rating system built into your site, how relevant or how appreciated is it by your target audience? Again, another couple internal metrics. Average number of edits prior to publish. Is your publishing process bogging down in workflow and getting people to edit and review and legal review and that sort of thing? And average time to respond to email inquiries. So again, these metrics, these may not be at all appropriate for your website, but we'll talk about how to come up with these. But this gives you a sense as to what key performance indicators look like. You'll notice they tend to be percentages and averages and ratios as opposed to raw numbers. Raw numbers are less interesting and less actionable. What's not indicated here is they tend to have a time frame, monthly, percent new visitors on a monthly basis, for example. Percentage of visits that sign up for a newsletter this month versus last month. And that allows comparisons over time. So that's what they look like. Here's why we need and want them. They allow us to set targets for ourselves and improve our website over time. They let us determine how successful we are and where we need to take action to make things better. They determine whether what we're doing is worth continuing to do. How viable is this? Are we spending our time and perhaps our money wisely? What's working and not working for us? What lessons have we learned that we need to apply to future projects? Focus on our goals and priorities. Why are we doing this? What are we hoping to achieve? They hold ourselves accountable. Are we delivering on our promises? And they provide a foundation for continuing to improve over time. So again, in summary there, KPIs can be used to evaluate, promote, control, celebrate, budget for coming fiscal, learn, motivate and improve. So you may be wondering, that's all well and good, Brian. I totally get that. I'm with you on this. I'm confused, though. I really thought when I was digging through Google Analytics, I thought I was finding KPIs. And the reason we don't do it that way is I'll show you sort of my take on the KPI development process. So here's everything's always in 3 or 4 steps. This is how I see the measurement process for measuring performance on your website. It always has to start with a clear strategy. You need to know why it is you're doing what you're doing, how you plan to achieve your goals and objectives, what it is you want to see out the other side, and then from those factors determine how you should measure them and what key performance indicators or metrics you should be using to get there. And we'll go into this in a bit more detail, but the strategy is where it has to begin. And I'm guessing this is less common in the PLEI sector, but we actually had to start introducing strategy workshops because we found that we went in to help clients develop key performance indicators, that sometimes the strategy wasn't clear, and we needed to back up and start over and determine what the strategy was so that we had the fuel we needed to develop key performance indicators to measure the website ongoing. So I can't emphasize enough that it begins with strategy. So well-formed KPIs, well-formed, I'll show you what, I've sort of a few catchphrases around how this works. I call it fit, form, and function. And I've added a couple more Fs as well. I'll show you. To sort of keep in mind the good principles for forming KPIs. The key is you want a strong correlation, a strong relevance between the KPIs and your strategy. So how well do the KPIs actually correlate to the goals and objectives you have for your organization and your website? And that's where we'll spend time today. I won't focus too much on implementation, although we will touch on it. Implementation is, once you understand what it is you need to measure on your website, implementation is how it's physically placed on the site. So if you are using a tool like Google Analytics, is it installed correctly? Have you done the necessary customizations you need to do to produce the KPIs that you determined you need? And web analytics, Eric T. Peterson, who's a well-known sort of web analytics guru in the industry, his catchphrase is, web analytics is hard. And it is. A lot of websites suffer from bad data because it can be tricky to get an implementation correct, particularly if the website's split over multiple domains or you're using a third-party shopping cart or things like this. So another key part of sound implementation is quality assurance, testing the analytics and make sure it makes sense and fine-tuning the implementation to make sure you're actually getting the data you think you are. And again, we won't have, I won't go into this in detail today, but the measurement and improvement process, this is really why we're all here. No one creates key performance indicators because they love it or it's a means to itself. We do it because we really want to make our website and our organization better. So this is where the action happens, and you want to move beyond simply reporting key performance indicators and into what are we going to change, what are we going to improve, how are we going to do this differently, what can we test, how can we make this better. That's where KPIs are valuable. You want to avoid being another industry guru, Avinash always says, you want to be an analytics ninja, not a reporting squirrel. So you don't want to be just pumping out reports around the company. You want to be talking about how can we make things better. So that's what that process is about. Again, we'll focus today momentarily on the link between a clear strategy and well-formed KPIs. Here's what happened, though, when we tried to do it the other way by digging around in Google Analytics frantically, trying to find a metric that was useful. Basically, you're trying to work from your sound implementation, but because you haven't talked about your strategy and your KPIs first, you're going backwards. And who knows if your implementation is sound, because you need to determine what KPIs you require before you implement on the website. So you may have implemented correctly. You may have a simple site that requires little customization, but you really don't know until you have the KPIs in hand. So you're already at a disadvantage working backwards, just from this perspective. So instead of working from a sound implementation, really you're just splunking around your web analytics tool. Secondly, without the link to strategy, your well-formed KPIs, at best, they are metrics. At worst, you're just looking at a bunch of numbers, and who knows how relevant they are to your actual strategy and actually measuring success. So this is why we want to look through the right end of the telescope and stay out of the weeds, to mix both metaphors together. And this is why we want to do it in the way I illustrated, this way. So let's talk a bit about a clear strategy for a moment. So as I mentioned, strategy is the foundation of the whole process. You need to understand where you're coming from in order to understand where you need to go. You need to understand why you exist to understand if your website is helping to deliver on that promise. So the way we look at this is what you're going to look to your strategy for is to answer these two questions. And this will sort of guide where you head in terms of making the next steps. So why does your organization exist? And fortunately, being in the PLEI sector, most organizations are very well structured in terms of strategy and goals and where they're headed. So usually these things are well documented and easily accessed. So for the why of the organization, you're going to look to things like your vision statement to answer why does this organization exist? What are we trying to do as a whole? Ask ourselves, how can the website deliver on the objectives of the organization as a single channel? Some aspects of your organization will be delivered well through other channels, by telephone, in person, through outreach, through whatever other vehicles and channels and methods you're using. But you need to understand the core purpose in order to ask yourself, how is the website delivering on this objective? Why do we need a website in order to deliver on the objectives of the organization? Secondly here, the how. And this is where you look to, often the how is captured in a strategic plan of some description, or a list of strategic initiatives. And, these are often found in the service plan. Many organizations have, 3 to 5 year service plans, which is great. And in many ways, the PLEI sector really has an advantage over sort of even over corporate organizations in this regard, because these things are well documented, and you can kind of cheat in terms of working towards your KPIs. So the how, so these are key initiatives. Usually they provide a sense as to where the organization or the website is today, where the organization and or website are heading, what key things the organization is going to do in order to achieve those goals and objectives. And this is really rich fodder for starting to understand the next stage, which is outcomes. So the two key components to help you deliver well-formed KPIs are outcomes or results, and then the measures or the evidence of those outcomes. So this is where you need to look at the why and the how and determine what success looks like for the organization. What outcomes or results will create the collective fist pump, is the metaphor here, for success. So what does victory look like for the organization, and particularly in this case through the website or through a particular initiative. So there are methods I use, named Stacey Barr. You can look her up on the internet. She's an Australian. She's focused on performance measurement. She offers training in a method she calls her blueprint process, where she's got some really great templates you can take advantage of for developing KPIs. So I won't go into her methodology specifically, but it is a good method of working through and documenting, and she's got some really great templates for doing this process. I was fortunate to be trained in her methods. I was fortunate to be trained in her methods a couple years ago, and she doesn't come to North America very often, so I feel very lucky to have attended her sessions. So the two elements we look for in defining that fist bump or looking for success are so the what, or the results, and then the evidence.
I think somebody's trying to reach you, Bryan.
Sorry, I'm distracted here. The world's falling apart. So the two things you're looking for here are the results and then the evidence of that those results have taken place. So we look for this evidence, and then we work to translate them into measures. So talk a bit about this process. So what do outcomes or what do results look like? So these are sort of goals translated slightly in order to get us a step closer to actual measurement or actual key performance indicators. So here are some examples. So reasons you might have a website, or reasons your organization might exist, or reasons behind or outcomes you're looking for from a particular project. So again, my examples tend to be web-based. Website users are better informed about their legal issue or legal matter. This might be a purpose you have or an outcome you're looking for. If, If people are better informed, then we've done our job, right? Website users know what legal steps to take. Maybe it's a confusing area, or there's a myriad of organizations people need to deal with or steps to take. Maybe they know now what to do or what steps to take to get them home. Maybe that's an objective or outcome you're looking for. Website users get connected with relevant resources. Maybe you're a connector, like the ClickLaw resource that the BC Courthouse Libraries provides. You're connecting people with resources across a bunch of different organizations. Website users contact us for legal help. Maybe your website is a channel to just bring people into the office, to get people on the phone, to bring them in to get them help or advice. Maybe it's purely an outreach tool, or in corporate speak, you'd call that a lead generation website, right? Maybe you're educating lawyers. Maybe lawyers are now more empathetic or better aware of what clients need, how they can better help clients, or how they can better inform the industry or clients. Maybe you're maybe you're a connecting organization and you're just trying to pair up lawyers with people who really desperately need services on a pro bono basis. Maybe you're a sort of a networking type website or that type of thing. Clients prefer, maybe your website is purely just efficiency. There's nothing wrong with that. Maybe it's easier to serve clients over the website than via the phone. And so maybe your goal is to provide a resource that clients actually prefer over phoning in. Maybe you're looking to cut costs in other ways. Maybe those paper brochures that are perpetually out of date and constantly need reprinting, maybe the website could serve clients better. So these are things where if the website does these things, we know we'll have achieved our objectives. That's kind of how you want to look at it. We know we'll have been successful when X happens, or when this result is achieved. And so these objectives are where we start trying to translate into measurements. And often by being able to get statements of success and statements of desired results in this format, it becomes a lot easier to extract and translate KPIs. So the next step here is we start looking for evidence that the results we're looking for on the previous screen are being achieved. So these are the flavors of evidence I've come up with. There may be more. I think this list is fairly comprehensive, and definitely notify me if in your own KPI development process you come up with your own category. I'd love to include it here. But these are sort of categories of evidence that we're seeing the results we want. So you might have financial results, sort of affecting the bottom line directly in some way that's visible. We'll talk about examples of each of these in a moment. Behavioral, are people doing things differently? Are people doing things the way you'd expect or are valuable to you? Experiential, so is the process going better for people? Are they enjoying it more? Are they able to complete their task? Those types of things. Technical, the technical ones are often quite simple. Maybe your website is slow and you would like it to be faster. It's quite easy to measure, usually. Attitudinal, maybe you need people to get a new perspective on how things are done, or a better way of approaching things. Physical, I'll mention last, and I mentioned purely to be complete. It probably doesn't apply to most of certainly I've never had a physical KPI, but if you're dealing with something very stressful, and the example I give, I don't know if this thing exists, but if you had like you know, maybe you built an interface for some air traffic controllers, or a display for someone who diffuses bombs or something like that. It may be your objective to reduce stress for people. So you may have a KPI around heart rate or stress levels or adrenaline or something like that to measure that. So again, I'm sure that's excessively rare. So in each of these categories, and somewhat related to the results or objectives I mentioned earlier, here's how these categories might play out into evidence. So this is evidence of success, evidence that what you're trying to do on your website and what the result you're looking for is coming to fruition or is being accomplished. So a financial example, you know, if you were hoping to save money on print brochures, you know what your invoice was for print brochures last month, and you know what your invoice is for print brochures this month, or you know what it was for last year and this year, and you should be able to see a decline in the money you spent on brochures in some way. Financial examples are really usually nice and cut and dry. Behavioral examples. So if you're able to quantify, if you're able to track your phone calls, you know, we'll talk about feasibility metrics later, but assuming you can track the number of phone calls you receive, or you've got a tool that measures that, hopefully you're getting more website visits than phone calls, if that's a behavior you're looking to change. Technical, I gave an example of a slow site. Maybe your pages will load faster. It's really easy to measure. You'll notice, and this would be a clear web analytics example. Google Analytics has a page load report. Your average page load time, it's already sounding like a KPI, will be lower than it was previously. Attitudinal, visitors tell you in some way, anecdotally, through surveys, through some method of gauging satisfaction, that they're satisfied with the website. There's ways of measuring this, and that would certainly indicate success to some degree, particularly in, again, monitoring the change over time. Experiential, the time required to submit a request is reduced. So this is all about task completion. So if you've got a lengthy intake process where someone needs to fill in a form online perhaps, can you reduce the amount of time that it takes someone to do that? There's ways of testing that. And physical, again, not relevant to most of us. So you can see now that we've talked about the results a bit, we've talked about some of the evidence that the results are occurring, and now we're able to take that leap towards actually drafting some key performance indicators. But it's important to remember that we had to start with the strategy in order to understand what results we wanted, and then we had to look for what evidence would support that those results were occurring before we can get to the KPIs. And we're still not yet going into the analytics tool. We're still working our way towards digging into Google Analytics or other tools. So you can see how this is now flowing towards something that something that looks closer to those key performance indicators that I showed you in the examples at the beginning. So if our goal was if we're looking to measure spending less money on printing brochures, monthly brochure spend, monthly brochure spend per client, for example. So you might want to measure both of these because the ratio 1 per client there could be important, because you may be really successful in getting a lot of clients and helping a lot of people, in which case just looking at how much you spend on brochures alone isn't really measuring whether you've reduced it. If you're reducing your cost per client, then maybe you are successful, whereas your brochure cost could still be going up each month. So that's why ratios and averages and monitoring over time become really important. More website visits than phone calls. Ratio of online to offline client touches. So if you're taking phone calls or getting people at the front desk, if you're able to measure that. You're seeing sort of what your ratio or what the balance is there. Monthly call volumes per active client. Are you getting fewer calls per client? Again, ratios here may be important if your organization is just launching and gaining new clients all the time. Again, the technical ones are always easy. Faster website page load, weekly average page load time, daily maximum page load time. There's probably a fistful you could use to measure that. Visitor satisfaction, average monthly satisfaction rating. Usually this would be survey driven. You can run, there's tools out there, there's one called 4Q, there's others out there, Campile is one that you can measure satisfaction ongoing automatically on your website. You can watch the trend over time. Request task time, average monthly time to submit a request. There's two approaches you could do for something like this. You could measure it with some analytics tools will measure this. And you could also measure it in the lab if you happen to be doing some usability testing of your website. You could see if this is on the decrease. Stress symptoms, stress level rating, heart rate. You might use things like that on the physical side. So once you've got some draft key performance indicators together, there's a few sort of tests I like to apply to them to make sure they're appropriate. So the catchphrase here are the 3 F's, so fit, form, and function. Fit is fairly straightforward. Many of you will have heard of setting SMART objectives or SMART goals. So hopefully your KPIs also follow this this mantra. So you want them to be, the S is specific. You want them to be, you avoid fuzzy language and be really clear as to what exactly the KPI is and therefore what it is you're measuring. It has to be measurable. So this is where feasibility comes into it. You need to be able to observe it or quantify it in some way. Achievable, if you're setting targets for yourself, you don't want to collapse morale by setting objectives you can't possibly achieve. But you don't want to sandbag and make it too easy to achieve either. They need to be relevant. They need to match your business objectives. And they need to be, particularly if you're setting targets, they need to be time limited, and definitely they should be temporal in that you're showing progress over time. So that's fit. Here, this quote, Eric T. Peterson, I mentioned him earlier. About 8 years ago, he wrote a book called The Big Book of Key Performance Indicators, which is all a book full of website KPIs, which may be useful to you. It's available for download. He may have made this one free. Let's Google his book there. But I like this for KPI, what I call form. So this, are they taking the right format? So again, they should use rates, ratios, percentages, and averages instead of just raw numbers. A big table of numbers isn't very useful because it's tough to know what to do with it or how they should be actioned. You want to use tachometers, thermometers, and stoplights rather than pie charts and graphs. You will want to use, I am a fan of sparklines though, and showing trend over time. Tachometers and thermometers are kind of in disfavor in the data visualization field, but you do want to show progress against a target. I think that's the main thought to leave with that. Temporal context we talked about, showing change over time instead of tables, and you should be able to act on them. You should know what to do when the number goes up or down or stays the same. You should be able to document, for this KPI, here's what we will do when the metric declines, when it increases, and when it does not change. And that sort of ties to the, if you remember the far right end of the arrow, taking action and improving things over time. So function, this is sort of the final test for key performance indicators. Are they on strategy? Hopefully by going through all that work and starting with the strategy, they will be on strategy. Having buy-in is critical. You want to get to the point where when you talk about the metrics, you no longer debate whether they are the right metrics. You talk about what should be done because they have changed. So buy-in here is, I don't talk much about it here, but buy-in is absolutely critical to your performance measurement practice in your organization. Because if there's just agreement here, you're not going to get towards the end result of making things better. So you're going to want group participation throughout this process. You don't want to do the ta-da reveal at the end, because people need to go through that logical process of understanding where these KPIs came from, how they tied to the evidence, which reflect the results, which reflect the strategy. That's pretty critical. And mission critical, the K in KPI is key. So you're going to want the sort of 5 to 7, which, Avinash Kaushik says, what metrics would you take to a desert island? Which are the core ones that you need to survive that really indicate how well things are going? That's not to say you don't look at others when things go wrong or you need to investigate something. But to be a KPI, it should be mission critical. And the rest are metrics or measures that you use for diagnostics or digging into things. So fit, form, and function. I do want to talk about, I think it's worth discussing key performance indicators in the nonprofit space. I do think there are some hurdles there that are preventing adoption of using KPIs and measurement that I'd like to touch on them. So there are 3 hurdles that come to mind for me for KPIs in the nonprofit sector, and definitely interested in your feedback whether you've run into these. The first is just, particularly if, the first is business models. So particularly if you were to go about it the wrong way and start with the tool first, this can be really a problem. So, you look at all these metrics, and there's a whole, Google Analytics especially, or almost any of them, have a whole e-commerce section. And so right away, e-commerce isn't really a good fit for most, particularly nonprofits. It doesn't really make sense. So that whole section of the analytics packages is kind of alienating right away. It's not really off to a good start. Advertising, not-for-profits typically aren't, and I hope they aren't, advertising on a site. That's not really the model. So you're not selling page views for money. So some of the tools there don't really make sense in that regard. Lead generation, I mentioned. OpenRoad has an intranet product called Thought Farmer. So we have a lead generation site where we look for people to submit their info and go to our sales rep, and you'll get a friendly phone call, and we'll try and sell you our intranet product. So lead generation site is for collecting people who contact an organization and try and sell things. So lead generation may be sort of a fit for some not-for-profits, but then again, maybe not. Maybe it's not the right metaphor or perspective. Customer support, these are usually help sites or help forums for people who have purchased an existing product. So that doesn't really fit either. So where do you look in your web analytics tool for not-for-profit or advocacy type business models. And I think for some organizations, it's a bit of a struggle and it's a bit alienating, and I think people get frustrated with the tool and sort of end up rejecting the notion of measurement along with it, kind of the throwing out the baby with the bathwater kind of thing. So that's a hurdle. Another hurdle I suspect is out there, and again, I'd be really interested in your feedback on these hurdles. I think some folks join the nonprofit sector for really noble reasons, and want to make a difference in the world, and I think don't want to be part of the corporate sector, and that's very respectable. And I think some people associate this type of measurement with greed and sort of corporate sort of the corporate approach to things, and don't want to be part of that world. So that can be a problem. In other words, the terminology can be a bit alienating. So there's conversion rates, average order size, time to convert, balanced scorecard, monetization models, and return on investment. None of that seems to make sense for the nonprofit sector. So here's my thoughts on leaping these hurdles. So business model-wise, again, think strategy first. Don't go digging in the tool, and focus at the metric level. Sort of not. Don't think about the terminology of the tools. Focus on what's important to your organization and what makes your nonprofit unique. The KPIs for corporations, take what's useful of the whole performance measurement focus and leave the rest. Just use what's relevant. And if it's worth doing, it's worth doing well. And KPIs are just a tool to tell you how well you're doing. Nothing more than that. Terminology-wise, I'll talk a bit later about using money as a metaphor, and think about what's a good use of our time in terms of return on investment. It's a better perspective for nonprofits. So three sources of inspiration for KPIs for nonprofits. Again, dig into the strategy and service plan document, review the annual web project list, and the third way is a sort of a team discovery session. So here's, this is from the Legal Services Society in BC. We did some work with them quite a while ago, and this is kind of an unsolicited look at their service plan, but I did find it quite good. So they've got an objective here. People with low incomes who have legal issues use LSS services. So they've got a couple indicators here: percent of clients satisfied with the accessibility of LSS services from a survey, and percent of clients satisfied with the helpfulness of LSS services. So here's a way you can just translate this for the web. So the percent of clients that report using the website within the last 12 months, if you're doing a survey anyway, throw in a couple of web questions. Or perhaps the percent of website using clients that report that the website helped to find an answer. Again, it's easy to add these additional questions if you're already doing a survey, and this will be great KPIs for how the website's supporting the organization. So looking at the project list, if you've got a project to redesign the navigation, you're trying to get so that more people are finding information on the site. So the evidence in that case would be more traffic to third-level pages, perhaps. And then you could have KPIs around third-level navigation, page views per visit, percent of visits that include a third-level navigation page, both well, with a little configuration, not too much work. Say you're redesigning a form on the page. People weren't sure what data to enter. So evidence that things are improving is maybe there's more attempted applications. And the KPI might be form completion rate. % of visits that include the start of the form also include the success page. Discovery method. Why does our organization, so here you'd sit down with a group of coworkers. If you don't have the advantage of a service plan or project list, ask yourself some simple questions. Why does the organization exist? How does the website achieve the goals of the organization? Why do we have a website as opposed to other ways of addressing our audience? And how will we know, for each of these, how will we know when we've been successful? And go through the evidence types and draft the metrics. And again, look at fit, form, and function. So once you've done all this, you can now sort of gently proceed into Google Analytics. But now you know what you're looking for. You've got some focus. You know you've got a sort of draft metric in mind or a loosely phrased metric, and you can look in the tool and see if that data exists for you, or look for a survey tool to help provide that answer. But the key is you're going in focused and not distracted, and you're not going to head off into the weeds because you know what to look for, and hopefully, if you're familiar with your tool, you know where to go. Feasibility. Is it actually possible to measure the metric you've drafted? Is there a tool out there, if you're using Google Analytics and it's a web-based metric, is that metric in there? Is it easy? Is it going to be easy to report on a regular basis? Some of the more complex survey questions, you can't run a complex survey every month, so maybe it's only feasible semi-annually or tri-annually in the case of that Legal Services Society example. So you look at the feasibility of the metric. You may need to dig into the definitions in your tool and find out, is this actually measuring what I think it is? Is it relevant? Remember relevancy from earlier. Is it relevant to the goal we're trying to show achievement on, or the result we're trying to see? You may need to dig into some of the definitions in GA in Google Analytics without sort of blindly scooping numbers out of there. And often numbers in Google Analytics or any tool, the precise number you need is often not available out of the box. You need to do some configuration or often some segmentation in there. So there's a tool called Advanced Segments where you can say, I want a particular portion of my audience that's, does this during their visit. And then you can compare the percentage that did that versus the total and things like that. So often the metric's not going to hit you on the head. You may need to do a little work to what they call, some analysts call it torturing the data. Torture the data to speak the truth and tell you what you're interested in. And again, back to the sort of nonprofit gotchas, use money as a metaphor. So this is the only actual GA example I'll provide, but there is this little thing in GA if you're setting up a goal in GA that you want people to hit a certain page, and you can determine what percentage of people made it to that page. There's a little goal value at the bottom, and you're not literally saying this goal is worth $100 to the organization. What it is it allows you to compare how successful different pages are. So if you've got multiple goals on your site, one's really important, one's less important, you might set one at 100, and you might set the other at 50. And what happens in Google Analytics over time is this dollar index stat, I think they might have renamed this recently, but this dollar index stat basically says pages that have a high correlation against your goals are going to be weight higher over time. So you can compare the value of your pages and know where to focus your efforts. So this is a case where we're bending the tool to suit our purposes and sort of making it useful and relevant to our own, what's valuable to us as an organization. I mentioned surveys and things. This is a slide stolen from Avinash, whom I mentioned earlier. This is how he sees the tool landscape, and all this to point out quickly. You're going to want to look. Many of the KPIs I showed as examples are not available in Google Analytics, or what we call your clickstream analytics tool. You're going to need to do other types of analysis and use other tools and other data sources to get the answers. So, there's tools that measure what people are doing on the site. There's tools to test out different versions of content and things like that. I mentioned surveys quite a bit. There are tools out there that let you compare how your site does versus others on the web and things like that. You're going to want to take advantage of a whole suite of tools to get your answers, because your clickstream tool won't provide them all. So next time your boss asks you for some metrics for measuring a site, you won't say no problem. You'll say, I'll schedule a workshop, and you'll get the group together, get some buy-in, have the important discussion, maybe use some of the Stacy Bar templates, and work through the process of converting the strategy into desired results, into determining the evidence of those outcomes, and then into metrics. So instead of straying into the weeds, you'll wander into a pleasant field covered in rainbows, and your boss will be thrilled. So, you may be aware there is a web lab occurring next week. Either way, I think this homework assignment is valuable, but if you are participating next week, I really look forward to your questions. Consider doing this assignment and coming to next week with questions. Think about a project in your organization. Think about the goal of that project, what you're after. One result you'd like to see, what evidence you might find that result is occurring, and try drafting a key performance indicator based on the evidence you might find. And come prepared, or you're welcome to send me an email as well if you're unable to participate next week. Come with questions around how that went, and any questions, we can talk more on the tool side as well next week if that's of interest to people. Come with questions next week as to how to make that, how to put that KPI together. That is what I have prepared for you. So.
Okay, thank you, Bryan. Let me just do a quick advert quickly. Hold on. Let me get back the ball, and I'll. Sorry. You should all soon see my. Okay. I just want to remind everybody that this project is thanks to the partnership between these 4 organizations: CLEO, Cortas Libraries of BC, Éducalois, and POVNet. And also, definitely, we want to thank our project funders, the Law Foundation of Ontario and the Department of Justice of Canada. They are the reason we are able to show you this. So if you do have a question, we invite you to use the Q&A window that is on the bottom right of your WebEx application. And if you do have any, if you have any, you can just enter them there and ask us. I do have one from earlier, from Fiona, actually, who's from CLEO, and she's in charge of the Your Legal Rights project. So I'll read it out, Bryan, for you. She says she has a question. Since we started using Google Ads, our percentage of overall site satisfaction in the 4th quarter has gone down. While disappointing, this seems predictable given that our site is being tripped over rather than recommended by service providers or word of mouth. Not that we don't want to increase the site satisfaction percentage, just looking to interpret this data. Any thoughts? Keep in mind our site is about getting legal help, and frankly, there is not enough help or answers out there. How do we factor this in as well? Well, okay. Well,
wow, a really good question. I think what's happening here. So it's kind of it's a bit of a conundrum, and I think a lot of websites face this same problem. Is we face this problem as well on our own Thought Farmer site, which again was generating leads for a product we sell. So if in sales speak, you look at this as a a sales funnel, we'd call it, right? So a certain percentage of customers will have heard of you, or you'll have reach with them. And again, a certain number of people will see your organization in a list of Google results, or in this case, Google ad results. And then a subset of those will actually click on the ads and arrive at your site. So you acquire them in some way. So the challenge you want more people on your website, so you advertise in order to increase your reach and hopefully increase your, what we call your acquisition. So what percentage of people who see your ad click on it, and what percentage or what number of visits you get total should increase by increasing your reach. What can happen though is you're casting the net wider to get more people on the site, but what may have happened is you may have decreased the relevance of you're getting people less qualified, if you want, on your website. So one thing you'll want to watch, or where my instincts would send me, is you're going to want to look at what's called your bounce rate from the Google ads. So what percentage, put another way, what percentage of people who click on a Google ad and arrive at the site advance to a second page, or avoid what's called bouncing, or viewing a single page and leaving. So you don't just want any old people coming to the site. You want people who have legal needs and require legal information. So you want less casual, or people, as you say, tripping over your website. You want people who have needs to find you. So where you'll want to try and tweak your Google ad campaign is to try and lower the bounce rate, or get more people who legitimately have a legal question or require legal information on your site. And that can be tricky, because it may feel like you're shooting yourself in the foot, because you'll get fewer people on the site, but hopefully you get needier people, or people who really require that information. So that can be tricky. And if you set a KPI just to increase your visits, this is where visits may not be truly what you're after. And this is why KPIs, going back to strategy, is really important, because you really want to help people. You don't just want to tell your boss that you got a lot of visits, and we did a great job, we got more visits to the website, because as you may be finding, you can just buy visits, but what you really want is relevance. So my suspicion is that's what's happening there, and that's where testing different ad creative and testing different keywords, and that's where all that optimization is super helpful. You want to increase the relevance of the people arriving, not just cast a wider net just to get more visits.
Okay. If you don't mind, I'll just move on. There's another question from Tylen Morgenstern, at my organization, privacy and information security are extremely important. We do our best to use tools that host user data domestically, etc. Google Analytics doesn't seem to meet these criteria. Are there tools that balance privacy and analytic utility?
Whoa, fantastic question. I've been meaning to write a blog post about privacy in Canada for quite a while, and I really would like to get those thoughts out. Yeah, it's difficult because it sounds like your organization is well aware that Google Analytics, of course, stores data in the United States, and many organizations, many privacy officers aren't comfortable with that. Especially since there are U.S. laws, the Patriot Act and the Homeland Security Act, that allow much, reduce the hurdles that the U.S. government and law enforcement have to accessing people's data. So this is a really real concern for people, particularly in Canada. I have personally, I think I've confronted 3 vendors personally on this issue, and encouraged them to have Canadian data centers for this very reason. And I've not seen, I personally have not been able to impact this issue. Not that I have much clout, but the problem is, of course, Canada is a very small population, and we're about the size of California population-wise compared to the big United States and other areas. Unfortunately, a lot of my clients that face this issue and are really stricter end of the spectrum on privacy need to use a self-hosted solution, and the ones I'm aware of are come at a cost. So the 2 I'm thinking of are WebTrends, which was a traditional, if you've been around a while, they traditionally used to run your old server log files on it, but they also have a solution where you can put what are called page tags on your pages and measure it more from the browser side. WebTrends is one solution. I've got a couple there's a couple clients who are municipal and crown corporations who use WebTrends. Another I'm aware of, and I'd need to check this because the problem with web analytics vendors is they're always changing hands and merging and divesting. But the other is a company used to be called Unica, but they've been purchased by IBM, and I think IBM might have folded their products together. But the product used to be called Unica Net Insight, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you could run locally on your own, and that way you can keep the data wherever you're comfortable with it, either on-site or in a Canadian data center, what have you. The problem is, of course, 1, you got to have your own server infrastructure, and 2, you got to pay for the license for the product. So I don't have an ideal solution for people in this situation, but I'm very empathetic. And like I say, anytime I get a vendor's ear, I harp on it with them.
Okay.
Long answer to a complex matter.
Yeah, well, no, it's fine. Absolutely. I think this may be covered more in the next week's web lab. So thank you so much, Bryan. I'm sorry we've gone over already a bit our allotted time, so I'm going to take over. Thank you so much, Bryan, for this. And I'd like to remind people that the discussion could continue on PLEI Connect, so don't forget to register pleiconnect.ca. If you're bilingual, please attend tomorrow's French webinar for more on this subject. Do not forget to register for next week's web lab, but although, as you know, we have a limit of people that can attend because of the nature of the web lab itself, but to register you can do so at that address, clbc.webex.com. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us, and thank you again, Bryan, and thanks to, as I said earlier, our funders and the partners, and the project. Oh, okay, going the wrong way, but thank you all. Thanks, bye.
Super.